Beautiful.
Yep.
Thursday, March 17th, meeting of the Water Quality Management Committee will come to order. Present today, we have Matt Patrick down at the end here, Steve Layton, Virginia Valiella, recently returned from Italy. Arrivederci.
That's what I said to them. It was wonderful.
Eric Turkington here, John Waterbury, and Matt Charette. In the audience, our former colleague, Wynn Monroe.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Wynn. Nice to see you. And our harbor master, and Mr. Brown, who's supposed to be working on this man's house.
I'm off duty.
And the committee consultant, Sia Karplus. So, why don't we start, now that everybody's here who should be here, with the number one on the agenda, the Quashnet Municus update and the Wacoit Bay MEP review.
I'm excited to announce that all of the funding pieces are in place, and the contract has been written and is now in the phase of being signed with SMAST to complete the Quashnet Municus study. It'll start this spring. So SMAST is on deck, the scope of work is established. So 5 different funding sources. Kudos to town administration for being able to pull all that together, getting contract.
Oh, you should.
Good point. Everybody needs a mic.
Thank you.
I just want to take one and just put this way. So hopefully everybody, you can hear me. Let me know if you can. And so that Quashnet Municus study is on track to begin this spring with SMAST. It's going to be a very interesting study. We're very much looking forward to seeing the results. We're now going to launch into, unless there's any other comments about that study,
Just the dollar amount.
$43,500.
Okay.
$10,500 from the Water Quality Management Committee for the Town of Falmouth. Article 17, $10,500 from Mashpee Town through the Board of Selectmen. $2,500 from the Citizens for the Protection of Wacoit Bay. $500 from the Mashpee Citizens Alliance. And
Environmental Coalition.
and $20,000 from the Cape Cod Collaborative, Water Protection Collaborative. So a wonderful collaborative group of funding to get a very important project underway this summer. Thanks to everybody.
Yeah, I'd want to clarify, this is something that the town of Mashpee had at the top of their list of things in Falmouth that needed looking at, and they were very strong about that, and Matt kind of led the effort to get these 5 funding sources on the same page and succeeded. So this is lightning speed for government work here. We're talking about 6 months from the time this started to be put together to the time it got put together. So take a bow.
Well, when Matt Patrick speaks, people listen, I guess.
And what we're going to see as we start looking at this very complicated watershed is that the Quashnet Municus is an important part. So it makes, I'm very thankful that we're actually going to be looking at this piece of Wacoit as soon as the spring. So that's great. So we're going to now look at Wacoit Bay. I'm going to try to make this as comprehensive but as brief as possible. I'm going to start by showing you the Wacoit watershed and town lines. So the gray on the outside, starting, I'm going to use this. This is all the watershed. And this is 151, right up here at the top. Now if you look at this finer resolution, you can see the watershed actually goes up to the base. And when they talk about the sandwich portion of the Wacoit watershed, what they're really talking about is Joint Base Cape Cod. And this is all on sewer, so there's no septic load. So from all the way there, down here's 151 again, just to give some reference points. And then 28, you can't really see it because there's so much nitrogen. But here is 28, and here is 151. This red line is the delineation between Falmouth and Mashpee. And this is our first bona fide shared watershed, which makes doing the nitrogen calculations a little more complicated and requires a little more iteration. But so as you can see, it's a big watershed. There's the Red Brook is the town boundary here. And then there's sort of an arbitrary line here and here that follows some roads. For the town boundary between Mashpee on this side and Falmouth on this side. All of these orange dots are nitrogen load. I always think it's good when you go from a map to take a look at a picture. And so this is sort of an aerial of, this is Wacoit Bay, this is Hamlin, Jehu, I can't remember. Sage Lot Pond on the Mashpee side, and then we've got the Eel Pond Complex, which has different names depending on what your map you're looking at, but the Childs goes up here, the Quashnet River is right here, and this is Eel River, and then this is the west side and the east side.
The Childs River flows into Eel Pond East.
That's right. And you can see that on the map, which I will show you in a second. Just some other things, I thought it was very notable. This is Seacoast Shores. You can see the density of development and all of the trees as well. I was really amazed by just how green and how many tree roots there are related to PRBs, if you think about it. This is Washburn's Island, where it used to be. There's the Seapit Peninsula right there. And then this is the connection to Wacoit Bay and the Eel Pond system. MEP did a very extensive job monitoring. All the little yellow dots are all the different monitoring stations that they used to create the MEP model. The yellow dots with the circles are 3 sentinel stations. One is in Wacoit Bay, WB12, and that's the main one. But for our purposes, so to keep this in mind as we continue to have this presentation, Eel River, Eel Pond, again, see it says Eel River here, but if you look in other documents, the whole system here is called Eel Pond. This has a sentinel station, and that is important for future planning purposes. And here's the Childs River that also has a sentinel station. And as Virginia was saying, the Childs River goes into this section of Eel Pond. So it sort of feeds it from a nitrogen. We have 2 tide gauges, one at the Childs River and one at the Quashnet. And this is what we're going to verify. Part of what the scope of work on the Quashnet-Municus study is to really validate what kind of flows are coming out of that Municus part of the Quashnet-Municus system.
Why is there a sentinel station in Childs and say not in Quashnet or any of the other sub-estuaries of the bay?
That's a good question. You would have to ask the MEP.
Just curious.
That's, I thought the same thing, but they have their reasons for doing what they do.
You call it a tide gauge, but you say you're measuring flow.
It does both. It measures the height of the tide. So when they do the modeling, they need to validate their model grid, if you will, for their hydrodynamic model to actual tide measurements. And so that's how they validate their model. So it is a tide gauge, but it's also a flow meter, so that they can look at inputs and outputs for stream.
It's a real flow meter.
It's a real flow meter. And it will be a real flow meter going forward. This is a complicated look at the sub-watersheds of the Wacoit system. And what I want to point out is that the upper part of the watershed has direct discharges into John's Pond here and a Shumat Pond here. So these sub-watersheds go into the ponds. We have a zone 2, we have the fresh pond well, and this is the zone 2, this number 4, which doesn't really look yellow here, but it sure looks yellow on my screen. But number 4 here is a zone 2, and then the tan go into different parts of the water body system of Wacoit. And so number 1, number 10, number 11 are the Eel Pond system, and then 6 and 7 are the Childs River, and you can see how the Childs goes into Eel Pond, and then various other sub-watersheds going into different places. But that's from the MEP, and because the watershed and the sub-watersheds are so I would say just there's a lot of different water bodies feeding into LaPorte Bay. Our nitrogen subsystems, it's a big chart. It's not one or two like we've seen in other estuaries, but half a dozen. You've got LaPorte Bay and Child's Upper Branch, and then Eel Pond, south, west, and east, Washington, Hamlin, goes on and on and on. You've got all these different sources, but when you aggregate it and you say, okay, what's the present load in the whole bay system, and what's the reduction target in the whole bay system, you get a number, and it's a big number. And the reason it's a big number is it's a big watershed with 2 towns and lots of sub-embayments, and it's, call it 18,000 kilograms a year, a big number. And that's the beginning, understanding in aggregate, as an order of magnitude, how many kilograms do we need to remove. We then have to decide how much of that's Falmouth and how much of that is Mashpee's. So that's the other level of this analysis that we have to do. And fortunately, in the MEP reports, they do not give a distinction between Falmouth and Mashpee. It's simply the watersheds. There are no town boundaries taken into account. However, the Cape Cod Commission, as part of the 208 planning process, published in their Appendix 8C, the actual percentages attributable to each town. And so based on that information, not QA/QCing that information, not taking that, looking at every single cell of every single spreadsheet, but just looking at the table that they published in the 208 plan, we can get some percentages for planning purposes that Falmouth's contribution to the LaPorte Bay system is about 53%, Mashpee is 42%, and about 5% comes from Sandwich. And
If the base is all sewered, where's the 5% coming from?
impervious surfaces, fertilizer, the other controllable sources. Pardon me?
Old plumes, maybe?
No, I
No.
don't think they include, no, old plumes are connected. And that's what I said, I didn't go into the level
No.
of, so what did the Cape Cod Commission,
No.
why did they call it 5%? I'm just reporting, so that I think for us, we need to know that Falmouth is about 50%, 53%, whether or not the Sandwich portion.
No, I get that,
is
but I was just curious. 'Cause
But, and they did know that the base was sewered when they wrote the MEP
Yeah.
report, and so did the commission. And I know the commission included the sewer, from just from looking at other places.
So when it comes time to doing something about this, are you thinking about trying to get Sandwich to contribute? Because for just 5%, it would seem easier to me, just maybe Falmouth and Mashpee could split 2.5 each. and-
Sandwich has made it clear they agree with you 100%.
Yeah, sorry.
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think the other piece of it is when we start doing the formal planning, we do need to take a deeper dive into the actual numbers. I mean, we have to roll up our sleeves, because the thing I want to point out to you guys is that if you add up all the Cape Cod Commission numbers for how much nitrogen needs to be removed, you get 21,000 kilograms. But if you look at what let me just finish. If you look at what the MEP says, it's 18,000. So significant difference, 3,000 kilograms, which is over 10%, like 20%. There's a difference there. And we understand a little bit that the Cape Cod Commission used updated water use numbers. So updated water use is that's the basis of the nitrogen. But there's some other differences, and so what we would want to do is roll up our sleeves, sit down with the commission, and make sure each sub-watershed, we understand those differences, because in some they're huge. Especially if this was going to be the basis of parsing out who's responsible for what. You want to make sure you're getting the right kilogram numbers. You were going to ask me something?
Yeah, about the Sandwich thing, maybe I misunderstood what you guys were saying, but since it's the feds, and since it's tough for them to do that, why not just say, well, we know it's tough for you, so just give us money, and we'll let you off the hook. You don't have to do any thinking. You just contribute a proportionate share of whatever it costs us to do the rest.
They've already given us a
Yeah,
huge slug of
quite a
money.
bit.
Oh, okay.
But so for our planning purposes, it seems to me that it's reasonable to look at Falmouth's share of, I would use the MEP numbers because they are what the TMDL is based on. I mean, they are the regulatory standard right now. So I would use the MEP numbers, and then understanding that the Cape Cod Commission has given us these numbers for planning tools, but they're not the regulatory standard the MEP is. So 53% of that big number is about 11,000.
And that's the present load?
That is the present load.
So do we know what the projected build-out load is?
It's different for every sub-watershed. And we would go in and we would want to look at that. I have done these all along, when we started up in Megansett, with present load in mind, and when the build-out didn't seem right, I brought it up because there seemed to be discrepancies. In this case, it's too big to have some big number pop out at you like that. Doesn't make sense as a build-out load.
Just before you leave this page, so you figured out the percentages based on using the Cape Cod Commission numbers.
That's right.
Have you by any chance checked that if you used all of the SMAST MEP numbers, which total 17,700, did we come up with the same percentages?
They don't give you any differences for the towns. So I applied, so it doesn't tell you.
So
the
you're saying
MEP
you
report.
can't run a percentage using the Cape Cod Commission numbers?
You
I'm
can't-
sorry, using the
MEP.
SMAST numbers.
You can't because they
You can't.
only give you some watersheds and they cross town boundaries.
And they cross town boundaries, got it.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, I looked at that to see if I could, you could for some of them, but it wouldn't be
Okay.
accurate
got it.
enough to do.
Okay,
I want to go into this Cape Cod Commission's GIS and take it from there.
yeah. Okay,
And compare the two, which we can. I mean, when we get to that level of planning, we can absolutely do that. Interesting that there is a significant fertilizer and impervious surface stormwater load here as a percentage of the controllable load. These are big, usually they're single digits, 5 to 7%.
Yeah.
Now they're 12 and 13, just a little bit bigger, so the fertilizer and those, because there's a lot of land area in these watersheds. So just mostly it's the septic loads. And they did, because they had those two stream gauges, give us data on two of the stream inputs, the Quashnet stream and then the Childs. And as I was looking at this part of the stream working group, the stream nitrogen removal working group, I thought, Steve, this was an interesting one to look at because it does contribute 3,000 kilograms into the Wacoit system a year. And since we're going to be doing some additional analysis in that sub-watershed as part of the SMS work this summer, I thought we would get some good updated information on all of these parameters and maybe look at this as one of our projects. But it's 3,000 kilograms. Child's not so exciting, only 784 kilograms being contributed. But again, if there's a way to get rid of it, we would be listening because we're looking at all the non-traditional options or the alternatives. Almost 1,000 kilograms is what we're looking at least over 500. So these are the two tables in the report that tell us about those stream inputs. And so now we're going to talk about how we're going to get that 9,000 to 11,000 kilograms out of Falmouth's part of Wacoit. We know we have a fertilizer bylaw. We've looked at how much we could take as a credit because of our bylaw. Mashpee has a bylaw that looks just like Falmouth's that has been adopted. So both Mashpee and Falmouth have a fertilizer control bylaw. That would be 1,000 kilograms combined. I just started this saying as the watershed as a whole, about 1,000 kilograms for fertilizer, about 1,100 from stormwater. And recently, the Board of Selectmen heard a proposal to restore Farley Bog from the Rod and Gun Club, and that restoration, the MEP report counted 33 kilograms of nitrogen from a bog, because cranberry bogs contribute more nitrogen than regular homes. But since that bog is going to be deactivated, if you will, and not be contributing that nitrogen, that's about 33 kilograms a year. As we like to say, bean by bean. But that's, 33 kilograms is not nothing. But that's what that restoration project gives to us in terms of nitrogen removal, is in the bog. The other significant source, and change in a significant source, is atmospheric deposition. And there are MBL researchers led by Ivan Valiella and the Cape Cod Commission who are looking exactly at quantifying the change in atmospheric deposition in Wacoit. which makes it incredibly relevant and useful. And what they have found, and they've got publications in press right now, is that the atmospheric deposition load is half of what it used to be. Half. And so I feel like as we move forward with watershed planning, understanding that that half is gone is very, very important. And so Falmouth's share of that half is about 3,900 kilograms. That's a huge number. When you're looking at huge numbers, it's significant.
Is that consistent with the concentrations that they've measured then? Or has the rest of the model already taken that into account by sort of fudging everything else to agree with it? Such that
The model
you don't
hasn't
get
been run
anything.
since this finding.
This is a new finding.
This is a new finding, and nobody's run the model.
But it's new that human scientists know it. But how new is it that it is actually that way on the ground?
Well, it's been changing over the past 10 years.
10 years.
10 to 15, yeah, 10 years since Clean Air Act and catalytic
Really?
converters. I mean, much of this is because the scrubbers are on the coal-fired plants in the Midwest, and we have cleaner cars.
So
So
it's-
that's why atmospheric deposition.
It's
So
also
is done.
because we shut down the canal power plant, too.
So it's,
And it's your Prius too, it's my husband's Prius, and it's Virginia's Prius. I mean, think about that, and it's from, and it's wind, has Prius, no.
so it's dropped by half in 10 years?
Half.
In 10 years?
In
Okay.
10
So then
years.
the concentration should have dropped proportionately.
Not necessarily, because atmospheric deposition contributes dissolved organic and dissolved inorganic fractions. And if you look at, well, that's not why you wouldn't have noticed it. If you've got a load of tens of thousands, you don't necessarily see a reduction of 3,900 kilograms in the concentration change. And reading the report, reading this sort of publication, the development that's occurred over the past 10 years has balanced it out. So less atmospheric deposition, build out.
Okay, well, I think that's what I'm saying.
That is what the findings of this study are. And the Cape Cod Commission is going to come out with a report on this, and I think at some point it would be great to have it presented to the committee. But the net of it is, all the improvement in catalytic converters has been usurped by the amount of additional septic systems in the past 10 years. So it's a net zero, I guess is the finding. So as we continue to look at things, we want to look at the quotient lunicus and see what might be done to remove that 3,000 kilogram load that's coming in from there. And that, I think the study that's going on now, which is why I'm very, very thankful that that's happening, could be a big win. Permeable reactive barriers, we looked at them as part of, well, they've been looked at since 1994, and then work was done in 2005. During 2010, Lombardo Associates proposed a PRB to ring the Seacoast Shores Peninsula. And then when we did our CDM study of PRBs, we took a really good hard look at ringing the peninsula and found many obstacles to construction. It just didn't, it was sort of a non-starter. The roads are narrow, they're private, there's a lot of utility conflicts, there's trees, and the depth to groundwater is excessive. And so for all those reasons, ringing Seacoast Shores with PRB has not been a priority. What we've actually realized is that the PRBs right at 28 at the head of these estuaries might be a better way to intercept all the groundwater coming from the upper watershed. But there's a lot of investigation that has to go on. We have to, we're as Virginia and I can attest, there is a ton of work to getting even one well or a sequence of wells in the ground to actually look at nitrate concentrations and look at other constituents in the groundwater that may or may not make it feasible to do a PRB and have, reasonable downstream consequences with, iron and manganese and stuff like that. So there'd be more work, but we found more favorable sites in the Bourne's Pond, looking at Shoreward and Sailfish Drive. Is there something that Virginia you want to add?
No, that's fine.
Okay. So that's the PRB, and so shellfish propagation becomes a very important part of the conversation for alternatives. Mashpee is looking in this estuary per their MEP, for their CWMP, for about 6,000 kilograms, 5,760, using the Hamlin, Jehu, and Great and Little River sides, as you may recall, their side has all those water bodies, and that's what they're gonna do there. There's also a 23-acre Atlantic oyster grant, private aquaculture in the Seapit River. And we've got Eel Pond open north to a place called Sea Spray Drive for shellfish. And the last piece would be looking at denitrifying septic systems. So I'm gonna jump into a little bit about shellfish. Sea Spray Drive is right there as noted. The circle is where the private aquaculture grant is, right there. There's Sea Spray. So from all that, you can see, I wanted to show you this first, that there's a bunch of areas that are open and possible for shellfish propagation, and that private grant is there. And so I'm gonna go back and say, okay, you've got this 23 acres. We don't have information on how much they're growing or what they're doing. We haven't approached them to have a conversation at all. We just know that they're there and they've got a 23-acre grandfathered grant. And we also have an idea that if you've got a 3-inch oyster and you have 1 million of them, you can get 260 kilograms out.
But that grant has been there forever.
Well, it's been managed by
The Kellys
the Kellys for many years, but it's now an ongoing business.
And
we
it
don't
wasn't
know.
always oysters, it
That's
was
right.
mostly quahogs.
Yes, so we don't know what they're growing and how much they're growing of it because it's a private company.
Right, and that switch from quahogs to oysters maybe has some implications. And it's not all usable. I mean, I think that's the other thing. It may be 23 acres, but I'm pretty sure 23 acres is not
Doesn't,
usable.
23
Channel,
acres
isn't
sounds
it?
like a lot when
Well,
you
it's the whole
boat through
Seapit
there.
River.
Yeah, it must
Yeah.
The
be.
whole length of the Seapit River.
Right.
I think.
And I don't
But it's
think
not
that-
necessarily all
There's
planted.
well, there's navigation issues, so you couldn't
Yes.
put bags in the middle of the
And
navigation channel.
if it's been there, quote, forever, if it's been working, the only thing that counts is the increase in it,
That's
right?
correct. That's right. Yep.
So we'd have to have some idea what the baseline was and see what the increase is. So we'd want to, like I said, this is to just make us all aware of some of the planning factors that we would have to get into the detail of as if working with this particular private aquaculture grower made sense. And it might.
Can I just
Yep.
push that a little bit further? But somebody said there are 23 acres under cultivation?
That is the official legal grant.
That's what they're allowed to do.
That's,
But I think if you talk to the harbor masters,
do you want to, I don't think
Sure,
I'm
yeah,
allowed.
so there are certain areas
Can you
that's,
go up to the
Sure.
sorry. You look so good in that tie.
court. Hello, Chuck Martinson, Shellfish Constable. It is 23 acres. It's one of the oldest grants that there is in the Commonwealth. However, you're absolutely right. 23 acres is not the total area that's actually available for growing. Part of that area changes. It's dynamic, specifically at one end. So there's habitat fluctuation. There's also areas that have docks and gangways and boats on top of it as well, and moorings. And there is also a channel that runs through there. So, I think probably a good assumption would be, maybe 50, 60%.
it's mostly along the west side of the Washburn Island there, right? I would
Their
say.
activities, take place actually on both sides of the channel. They have more of their land-based work, which is on the north side, and then the south side, or I guess would be the west side, would be where they predominantly have their gear set up. And then, just to recap real quickly for the board as well, there was a time period for approximately 10 or 12 years where there really wasn't any farming that was going on there. So certainly, from our perspective, we're very happy to see this farming take hold there again and get some of the benefits from those animals.
So maybe we would be able to take full credit for
Right.
what the new stuff is.
That's right,
So-
if nothing was going on at the baseline.
As the baseline, exactly. That's very good information, thanks, Jeff. And it's very interesting because if we look at the subwater, well, maybe we can talk about that. So from a shellfish perspective, there is potential. If you just do a GIS and look at how much is open, there's about 150 acres in those rectangles. Obviously, it's not all usable, But, and you'd have to have discussion with Webner and the neighborhood, you'd have to do a survey. I think we're planning to go out and look at this stuff this summer anyway, as part of just understanding what we've got in terms of resource for the town. We'd have to think about what a reasonable target of oysters or cohogs would be. This is very much to be determined. I think it's much too premature to be throwing any kind of numbers out, but there is obviously potential, and that needs to be studied but first is to look at the bottom. You can't really know how much shellfish you can do until you know what you got. So moving on to denitrifying septic systems, the Falmouth side of the entire watershed from watershed MVP is 14,500 kilograms per year. There are 3,508 properties, so 3,500 properties. This is not a build-out currently. There are some undeveloped areas. If you look at watershed MVP, you see that the average contribution per property is about 4 kilograms of nitrogen per year. And so if we do some math based on that information from watershed MVP, if you have a septic system that removes 50%, half of 4 is 2 kilograms times 3,508 homes is about 7,000 kilograms. If all those houses had denitrifying systems at 50%. At 75%, which is a 10 milligram per liter system, which is not even as good as our layer cake's gonna do, you get 10,500 kilograms. So if our goal at this point is to get 5,400 kilograms that is left from our total expectation, which I have a summary sheet next so you can see all the numbers where they come from. It's 2,700 homes if you have 50% removal and 1,800 homes if you have 75% removal. So a lot of homes, a big, but a doable, I mean, it's not more homes than exist. And I think that's the threshold.
Well, that's
and
good.
that's important.
That's good to hear.
Well, it means that you don't have to sewer.
Well, except on seacoast shores, you can't put a denitrifying system
No, you
on
can't.
half those lots.
So that would be a sub-watershed question, and let me get through this because the Eel River is the sub-watershed that we want to talk about. If you got 500 kilograms from fertilizer and 600 from stormwater, and you took your 2,700 from atmospheric deposition, you've got 3,900 kilograms. If you're trying to get to 9,300, you have to think about how many shellfish and how much denitrifying systems would get you there. And one of the things that is important, I think, in the McCoy watershed is to look at sub-watersheds. And that speaks to your question of seacoast shores. If we remove all the nitrogen at the head of Wacoit Bay proper, we're not going to be helping the Eel Pond sub-watershed. And so the question really becomes, what do you do in a sub-watershed like this? And one of the reasons why this makes some sense to think about as a sub-watershed, maybe even a targeted watershed management plan, which would go maybe a little faster than a shared watershed plan, is because the only hydro connection is this right here. If this were closed off, this would be Bourne's Pond, or Great Pond.
Like Bourne's Pond.
It'd be like Bourne's Pond, it'd be like Green Pond. But we do have this connection, but this connection isn't necessarily the dominant hydro connection, or the it doesn't necessarily dominate water flow in this Eel Pond system. So if we thought about this as a targeted watershed, we would start to think about, okay, how do you handle this load? How do you handle the upper watershed load? So this is the lower half, and this is, so just to give you orientation, this is 28, and this down here is 28. So this is the lower watershed, and here's the upper watershed. And there's quite a bit of development in the upper watershed, and so the idea of what we're starting to learn about PRBs in this area, where I'm here, and here, might be relevant to the seacoast shores. But as John Waterbury often and appropriately points out, what do we do about we do have a significant load coming from here.
Before you leave this, I think it would be interesting to know why SMAS decided to make a sentinel station in Eel Pond West and Eel Pond East, which is the Child River here, and then another one in Wacoit. With targeted watersheds was a bureaucratic term that was ultimately developed to be just a watershed that was within a town, and it didn't exist at the time SMAS did its study. But he must have had some reason why he ended up with 3 different sentinel stations. And it sort of feeds into our logic here that you have such a huge watershed, if you take the Wacoit Bay watershed, that it may make sense to see if there are any pieces, sub-pieces of it that can be handled in a more logical way.
We're going to see Brian House soon.
Okay,
and
let's
we-
ask him
and
that question.
It's on my list of, my 2-page list of things to ask Brian House.
Well, is it related to the fact that on one of the first tables you showed, the percent reduction for Wacoit Bay was actually 0?
From
But
the
when it
bay.
was substantial for these
That is an
other ponds.
excellent point. Steve, you're so good at looking at this stuff. Yeah,
Okay,
so
where do you see
the
this?
0, the actual Wacoit is 0. The Childs is a 66% removal, and the eel is 66.
Yeah, it puts them in the worst case places.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's
If you take care of those,
probably-
that way you can't cheat. I mean,
He's- he's
you
done
just
that
had it out in Wacoit Bay, and you're done, and you leave the other places dirty.
But
He's
but
not
it
stupid.
becomes a really
Yeah.
valuable place for us to start looking, that's manageable.
Yeah,
It's a
Yeah, and-
manageable place.
And in the real world, Wacoit Bay has algae blooms and all kinds of things going on. It's not, there's not a 0 problem in Wacoit Bay.
no,
I don't know.
Right, but I think the idea is if you take care of these sub-watersheds,
Yeah.
Wacoit Bay will be fine because of the circulation.
that's a broad statement.
Right, yeah.
We won't go down that road.
Right, but I think that's what,
There was
I'm
an
not saying
analogous
it's my.
situation on the west coast, somewhere in North Falmouth.
Where if you
Don't
took-
ask me to quote the names,
Okay,
but
well,
May I make a brief comment?
Yes. Yeah, why don't you get to the microphone here and remind the world who you are?
I'm Win Monroe, and I live in Wacoit, and I was a member of the committee. Have you talked with Rick York about the case of Wacoit Bay? How much have you talked with him about the reason why it's 0? There's an enormous benthic flux, he says, and he's wondering why that occurs in the beginning. In other words, the benthic flux is very negative in Wacoit Bay. And I would like to know more myself about why it is so.
Yep.
I'm,
Algae that
Just
keeps
to remind
all
me,
the
yeah.
nitrogen.
it has something to do with algae, yeah.
It's the algal mass, is
Yeah.
the reason.
Is that why
Which
we
is-
have an algae bloom?
okay,
Good science question.
yes.
So the Eel Pond watershed, just in that watershed, as Steve pointed out, is a big nitrogen removal percent. It's also big numbers, about 3,200 kilograms from Eel Pond east, south, and west combined. And those are the numbers. About 500 east, 0 in south, well, obviously it's a pond. And then Eel Pond west has the big
Jeez, that's
nitrogen.
huge.
And that's the child's.
And that's the
Oh.
Childs.
No, that's the
that's
other,
not the child's.
That's the other
That's
side,
the-
yeah.
That's the Seacoast Sheds.
Seacoast Shore side, yeah.
And so with that, I thought that the next step would be to meet with Mashpee to discuss some of these shared watershed issues, to think about Eel Pond as a targeted watershed management plan, to prepare the summary document that includes some of these questions and the discussion that we're going to have, and then neighborhood meetings. That is the story on that.
Any comments or questions from the committee or from the public? As usual,
Matt?
a brilliant job. Matt?
well, I do think it makes sense to look at Eel Pond, east and west, as a subsection. That's obviously the most densely developed area, and we're going to have to figure out how we're going to address that pollution. And that's probably why Brian put the 2 sentinel stations on either side. It's interesting to me now that we have what you had a great name for it, the sandwich, or no, the cake,
The layer cake.
the layer cake. I think that has a huge potential. And we've got to think about how we can help people finance that if we're going to ask them to do that. And if indeed that would be less expensive than sewering, I don't know. So we have to look at all of those issues, obviously, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Any-
the
John?
problem with Seacoast Shores again is, and we've, on the Board of Health, have been replacing systems there forever. You've got 900 homes on Seacoast Shores with very small lots. And so you just don't have a lot of room to deal with a Title V system.
But if you
a lot
take
of them were
these,
on pits and, if you go in and try and put this layer cake in, that's going to be a real challenge in that sort of neighborhood.
that's something we need to look at. Can you fit a layer cake in
I think it's the
alongside
size,
Title V?
it's the size of a typical Title V
Yeah.
leaching field.
Yeah.
So if you can fit one in, you can fit the other in. If you can't fit one in, you can't fit the other in.
Or replace the original with the layer cake.
Yeah, but they
Right.
don't have the original.
They don't have
That's-
original, they have
They're
cesspools.
in cesspools.
Okay.
That's really what the problem is.
Yeah, that's
So
where
they're not Title V, you're not replacing Title V.
Yeah, that's where the economics of it get.
5,000 square foot lots, it's pretty tough to,
But it'd be worth looking at, because if it really is I'm trying to think of the size of a standard soil absorption system. What is it, 70 feet by 100?
depends on how many bedrooms you
Right.
don't do.
But then you,
It'd be worth looking at,
But
and I know that George has been asked to do a full proposal to the EPA, so he's gonna be really rigorously studying this stuff over the next year or so,
but then you're looking at the economics. To put in a brand-new Title V system, which doesn't do anything for the nitrogen, and then a layer cake for another $10,000 or $15,000, you're talking about a lot of money for somebody who owns a little cottage on a 5,000 square foot lot. In fact,
We have been amazed at the cost of just installing the IA systems for West Falmouth. It's stunning.
But IA systems they are expensive. There's a lot of,
Standard Title V septic systems in a lot of areas are really expensive.
yeah. But an IA system is twice
Yeah.
that.
any comments from the public on this Wacoit Bay review? I would note, we started up in North Falmouth and came around all 15 estuaries, and this is the last one. I think Wynn doubted we would ever make it to Wacoit.
I doubt the state would ever come up with the approval for the
Oh, for the MEP. That's right. When you were here, they were still dawdling with that, yeah.
Lightning
Well-
speed.
Yes. So. All right, next item on the agenda is the Division of Marine and Environmental Services, represented by the Harbor Minister Greg Fraser and the Shellfish Warden Chuck Martinson, and the Marine Biological Laboratories, represented today by Ken Foreman and Ann Giblin, have been before us before, well, some of them have, with a proposal for what we refer to as a sediment aeration study. In the past, we were asked to support an application to other bodies to fund such a thing, and we did that. We're being asked today to do something slightly different, which is to put a little skin in the game out of the Article 17 money. The reason it's being done today, and the reason we're being asked, is because everybody thinks it's important to do this, and we're looking for silver bullets, and one of them could be this. And for a fairly small amount of money, it would be worth finding out if it is in fact as good as its potential lays out that it could be. We'd like to do it this summer, which is why it's coming up now. And with that, let me bring on the proponents.
Introduce and then. Chuck Martinson again, Shellfish Constable. In our effort to work with the Water Quality Management Committee, we found this opportunity very valuable. Not only certainly are we interested in looking at things such as shellfish, but we're also looking at things such as shellfish habitat and eelgrass habitat and other very valuable resources to the community. I'd like to at this time invite up Ann Giblin from BL to speak. Anything?
I'm just here
Okay.
for moral support.
And Giblin Marine Biological Laboratory. As you know, we've been trying to get this off the ground for a little while. What we would like to do is put in a very small system. Ken and I have some students this summer, so we would be doing all the monitoring with these students and using our equipment in our lab to see how it works out. So the cost involved is really just for getting the system in place. All the monitoring is going to be on our nickel, so to speak. I think it has a couple benefits. I mean, I don't want to try to oversell this as something that's going to replace everything else you're trying to do, because it's not going to solve problems in all the ponds. But once you get a system that's extremely eutrophic, it starts leading to like a negative feedback. You have very low oxygen in the bottom. That means you have less removal of nitrogen through denitrification, coupled nitrification, denitrification. You reduce the habitat for benthic animals, less sediment aeration, less fish food, and it's just a negative feedback. So you get essentially the nitrogen being reused many more times than it might be used if the sediments were in good condition. So the idea here is to sort of jumpstart the system back to the way it was when it was healthier and try to keep that nitrogen from being used over and over again and remove some of the nitrogen that right now is fluxing up from the bottom, being taken up by the phytoplankton and going back down.
Could you just explain a little bit what it is that you're doing?
It's an in situ aeration system, so it's basically a bunch of little diffusers that are stuck on the bottom of the pond, and you put compressed air through them, and then the bubbles rise up, and what the bubbles do is sort of, through a buoyant plume, mix the water and introduce oxygen in the bottom waters. So by having that fully oxygenated water in contact with the bottom, the sediment is no longer nearly as anoxic.
Like a fish tank, as you said. We have here an example of black muck, which is what this is all about. The bottom of too many of our estuaries are covered with 2 or 3, sometimes more feet deep of this stuff, which is killing everything under it and killing everything around it and never going away. And that's what this is about. It is a way to make this stuff go away and get the bottom of the water body to be the sandy bottom that it used to be, where things can grow. Matt?
Yeah, I think that's one of the determining factors also in the MEP report is the number of organisms that are able to live in the bottom. There used to be a lot, now there aren't very many. So because of this muck, and I know, the Municus River above, above that bridge there's so much of that stuff in it. You go right up to your waist in it if you try to wade in it. So this is really a great thing to develop. Hopefully it works. I'm sure, I'm very hopeful about it, but this could really facilitate the cleaning up of these ponds. Even after we sewer everything, it could take years before you get rid of the crap that's on the bottom. So I think this is a great idea, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion that we send an approval to the selectmen.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that the committee requests the selectmen to approve the use of $12,500 from Article 17 for the purpose of funding the study that was presented to the committee on Tuesday when it was sent around to everybody? Is that the gist of the motion? Okay.
Sure, sounds good. Whatever you say, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, moved and seconded.
Can I ask, and what's the proposal? How, is this going to be just run in the summer? You're going to run it all year?
It's just going to be run, well, as soon as we can get it in, we'll put it in. It'll be probably run through mid-fall, late fall. When the water temperature's still pretty warm in the fall, you could be getting a lot of benefit from this.
And would we get a second year, or is this just a one-shot?
I don't know how long we have the equipment. I'll have to look to the
And how?
second year, possibly? Second year, possibly.
But
There's a
you're
control
just
area
renting it.
that you're going to monitor to sort of get an idea of what's going on?
So the idea would be to go in, get some sediment cores before we start, measure some things like sediment oxygen demand, benthic flux, and then continue to monitor that once the aeration goes in, along with probably put some sondes in place to measure bottom water oxygen conditions continuously, percent carbon in the sediments, percent water, sort of normal stuff like that. And then denitrification probably and then maybe once or twice over the course of the study.
Oh, great.
For the benefit of the television audience who may not have seen everything that was sent to the committee, the site that's been proposed here is right off of Falmouth Port, which is pretty shallow, and the Falmouth Port people have already agreed to be extremely helpful. It's Mr. Brown's backyard.
Yeah.
We really need it.
Yes, but that's the site, and the electricity and such will be coordinated with them, I take it.
Yeah.
Plugging into Doug's house?
Yeah. And like I said, the projected cost is $50,000, of which the monitoring match will be $25,000 from the MBL folks, and our $12,500 will hopefully be matched by funding or in-kind contributions from others by the time this takes place. We're still looking for that last piece, but I think the committee's piece is obviously key. Steve?
I think it's a great idea, and I actually read the papers that were sent around, and they were very encouraging. One even mentioned several inch reduction in the thickness in one of the sites.
Right.
It's
I
fresh
think
water, but still.
Yeah, I would be, some of that is also because the sediment quality changes and you get more cohesion in the sediment because the animals come in. So you have to be a little careful when you talk about sort of a depth reduction. I think it's more, I'm looking for a % carbon reduction and a change in the % water.
And I did have a few other questions. What is the other entity you're expecting for the other 12,500?
We're looking.
We're looking, okay. And if that isn't found, do we get our money back, or does the project go
we don't
at
expend
half
it.
speed, or?
Well, I don't think we'd expend it, but like I said, the other 12,500 might come in the form of in-kind as opposed to cash, but either way, unless all the elements are available for the project to go forward, it won't go forward.
And if this works and it was scaled up in some future scheme, do you have any back-of-the-envelope calculation of what we call the nitrogen return on investment?
So I can't give you that in terms of exact dollars, but I would expect that the difference between a well-aerated functioning sediment and a sort of sediment under a hypoxic bottom water conditions, you're going to remove at least 50% of the nitrogen. You're going to reduce the flux by about 50%, reduce the internal loading by about 50%.
The benthic flux.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of the normal range in an
So it would
oxygen.
vary estuary to estuary.
Right. But a normal oxic sediment, you get about a 50% denitrification rate.
And then my last question is, the Concom's approval was their so-called negative verdict, which
Yes.
is a good negative, like a
Right.
medical test.
That's a good analogy.
A good bet.
Is that because it simply isn't their jurisdiction, or because it's just an experimental?
I think if
event.
it's not interfering with navigation, which wouldn't be Concom, I can't see it having a negative impact. I also don't imagine this would be, if you went with this strategy, you wouldn't have this thing in for 20 years. You would treat an area for maybe 2 years, 3 years, and then be able to move it somewhere else. So I think maybe they weren't viewing it as a permanent installation.
And it's not just going to mix the oxygen, it's going to mix everything, like temperature. So you'll homogenize,
it would break
the whole
stratification.
body.
It would break stratification,
Right.
that's correct.
And there are no problems from that. Like
Most of
getting,
these systems are not, if they're stratified at all, they're stratified like sort of on a daily basis or when you have a freshwater discharge. Most of them are not. These are too shallow and systems to be really permanently stratified. I mean, if you put it in Sitter's Pond, that'd be a different situation, but.
If anything, the stratification is not a good thing in these ponds.
I was just thinking like the fish and temperature of the water and things like that.
Well, if it was a freshwater deep pond, that is one of the concerns with these systems. You know, you homogenize the temperature and the trout don't like it. But I don't think we're dealing with that kind of situation in the estuary.
Matt?
So just one point of clarification. It wasn't clear to me, the letter of support that we wrote, is that proposal still pending?
It was not asked to go forward for a full proposal.
Okay. And then my other question, I guess, to the committee is, being relatively new to the committee, what's the precedent for funding these, or partially funding, in this case, these one-off
Well, we thought about
studies
that, and this actually falls into the category of shellfish propagation, because creating a more bottom for shellfish is clearly within our goal here. One of the purposes that we were initially assigned was shellfish propagation. So it falls within that category. Our precedent has been to contribute occasionally, like in the Mashpee project, for example, we contributed 10.5, I think, and Mashpee contributed some. And we have had skin in the game in a number of proposals where we are not funding the whole thing, but we're funding a piece of it, and other people are contributing. Particularly when we make grant applications, we have either contributed in kind or real money to make those grants happen. And that's one reason we've got $500,000 in grants, is we've been able to put something in the pot when these proposals go in. And it isn't just us with our hand out asking for money. It's us saying, here's our money, where's yours?
Okay.
So it's been a good formula to
Yeah, it really has.
make things happen.
It really
I
has.
think I can answer that too, part. We're not the National Science Foundation. I mean, if I thought this was
Thank
pure
goodness.
research, I wouldn't have seconded it, and I would vote against it. And they weren't able to give me a back-of-the-envelope nitrogen return on investment. But just sort of intuitively, $12,000, ultimate, even a full-scale thing, is peanuts compared
Sure.
to a lot of the other projects.
For the viewing audience, this is a
For-
bargain. This 12,000 might sound like a lot of money, but for this kind of study, this is
right,
a great
exactly.
deal.
Well, no, I'm not just saying for the study, but relative to removing half of the benthic load in some of these estuaries. It's a no-brainer.
Of course, we don't know how it's going to scale. If you tried to do it on a bigger scale, it would be more costly, right?
Right, of course, but still.
Well, if this works, we'll be out knocking on the doors at a bunch of places for a full-scale operation, and I think if this works, people will be knocking on our door to help pay for it.
I was going to say the same thing, Mr. Chairman. You gave me credit for getting all the money for the Wacoit Bay, but I want to give you credit for going to the collaborative, helping us make that argument. And I think this would be a perfect thing for the rest of the Cape to get behind as well. So I hope, I don't know if you are going to the collaborative to ask for money, but I would recommend that you do. Probably the worst thing that could happen is we sewer these areas, and then 5 years, 10 years later, there's no eelgrass. I mean, it's going to be because of this benthic muck.
Yeah.
So we need to get behind this.
The second worst thing that could happen is we sewer these areas, and then we find that we have a cheap silver bullet, and we didn't need to. But I don't think that's going to happen.
No, and it's the expense of sewers and the reality of that is really driving all of the efforts that this committee is making to try and find other ways.
Correct.
On the books, sewering is the only answer, and this, I see this as seed money to try a new idea that did work in freshwater ponds. Let's try it in saltwater ponds.
Sure. Any other comments or questions from the
Just
committee?
one quick
Sure.
scientific question. Do you plan to look at phosphorus as well? Because I was wondering if you actually might end up reducing the phosphorus flux
Yeah.
from the sediments.
You know, as you know probably better than me, the story on phosphorus in saltwater is complex, but when they did this in a Baltic fjord, they did reduce phosphorus loading as well as nitrogen loading. But that was quite a bit lower salinity, and it was probably a little bit lower iron than some of our systems. But we will measure the phosphorus flux as well.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? If not, we should probably go to a vote on this.
Okay.
You've all heard the motion, and all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
This is a good example of why Falmouth is in the lead on these things. We have people in this town with imagination and at the cutting edge of science, and if something's going to happen in this field, it's going to happen right here.
That's right.
Just one final comment. This now becomes a recommendation that goes to the selectmen, and that they have to approve the actual expenditure from Article 17. So we will need to write up a summary, and I think you and Greg Fraser should be involved in what that summary should look like, and that the funds would then be put to your budget, I would presume. Okay, so that
Thank you.
detail is important. This is not done until there's a vote of the Board of Selectmen.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
All right, next item. the projected status of alternative nitrogen reduction projects by the Water Quality Committee from 2015 to 2019. This was a spreadsheet that went around, and everybody got a copy of it on Tuesday.
And I apologize, I was going to make copies on big pieces of paper for everybody, and
Okay, well, I have a couple of sort of pasted together versions, if anybody would like one. Well, everybody seems to have something.
excellent. You guys are good.
You want one?
No, thanks.
All right. I think the idea here was to kind of take a big picture look at what we have been doing and what we have projected for the next few years to do, keeping in mind that in 2019, we have to have an answer for the DEP as to what kind of a plan do we have for the estuaries in the southern part, south-facing estuaries. And so, Sia and Virginia and myself kind of pulled together a spreadsheet, as it were, or what do you call this?
This is a table.
A table of showing all of our initiatives, how far they've gone, how far they're likely to go, and what, kind of where we think they're taking us. I think.
Right.
And this is going to be more than a today conversation, but it's the beginning of a conversation, because we do have a 2019 deadline to draw some conclusions. And, so it isn't all about study.
And it really is, for us internally, it's a 2018 deadline.
Right.
When you think about the process of finally getting the CWMP to the state, we need to say to ourselves, we have to have something in writing as a plan for each of these estuaries by the end of 2018.
Is it approved by the selectmen?
Yes, and it has to go through the selectmen.
Yeah.
There's
a lot. Okay.
There's a lot.
And that's for all the estuaries.
It's for the south-facing estuaries. That's our number one obligation, and that's the certificate that we received from the secretary. So it's Little we've done, Little Pond. So it's Great Pond, Green Pond, Bourne's Pond, and Walkboy Bay. That's what we're obligated to do.
What about Oyster Pond?
Oyster Pond is on a separate track and doesn't have a secretary's certificate with a deadline. We're operating, I'm answering your question. I'm not saying that we shouldn't move ahead with Oyster Pond. I'm saying we don't have a deadline hanging over our heads.
West Falmouth is also part of this.
And, well, that's true.
They shoehorned it in
Yes.
when this came along.
So it's Falmouth Inner Harbor.
No, not even that.
Little Pond, Great Pond, Green Pond,
Bourne's Pond.
Bourne's Pond, Walkway Bay.
That was the
East
original
Falmouth.
scope of the original Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan that started in 2008.
Got it. So, is there a way to tackle this? Does it make some sense?
You want me to walk you through it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
why don't you?
I'm going to walk you through it. All right, so one of the things that we're looking at, the way we organize the chart is to look at shellfish propagation, denitrifying septic systems, eco-toilets, PRBs, inlet widening. So those are the main headings. So if we take, for example, shellfish propagation, we, in 2015, completed the demonstration project. So we've got results, we've got information, we're waiting for the final report to come in from SMAST, which is this year. We'll give our final presentation at the Conservation Commission, we'll have sense of denitrification rates, uptake from shellfish, and so that program is finished, the demonstration. But now, it's an aquaculture grow-out program being run by Division of Marine and Environmental Services, and so those efforts are now ongoing, and I have them through 2019 or 2020. The next one is that nursery aquaculture, the idea that we'll be growing in Little Pond. So then, this year, in 2016, we're going to be looking at feasibility of Bourne's Pond for additional aquaculture, and how many, trying to answer that question, how many shellfish can you grow in each of our estuaries? Bourne Pond's going to start this year, and then based on what we learn this year, there's going to be ongoing activity or not, depending on how the aquaculture plan goes, but that's why it's a TBD, to be determined. But this year, we've got feasibility going on. We're going to continue to relay in West Falmouth, and we'll know numbers.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
As you go through each one of these, why don't you say whether you think it's on target to give us the information that it's supposed to for making our decision in 2018?
Good point.
That's a great
Yes.
idea.
And, well, you don't have to come, that's going to be the question on everybody's
Right.
mind. You don't have to go
Right.
back through it the whole thing.
I think in a nutshell, with shellfish, given all that we're doing, we are absolutely going to know in the next couple of years some rational targets. And, we're going to talk about this more, but we're going to have some rational targets based on chlorophyll numbers, because shellfish don't uptake nitrate. They uptake phytoplankton, and phytoplankton has chlorophyll, and the chlorophyll numbers tell you how much nitrogen, because there's a ratio. And so what we really need to do is look at what do we have in the estuaries, how much chlorophyll is in the estuaries, so what's a reasonable number for shellfish? And we are totally on track for doing that, because we're very, very active in the shellfish world, and we've got great support from the Shellfish Constable and the Division of Marine Environmental Services to get our answers, not just on what can an oyster uptake, because we already know that. It's, so how many can we practically grow in these systems? And we're going to know that, absolutely.
And what about the denitrification part?
So the denitrification part, we're going to know in Little Pond after 3 years. And I think once we do a Bourne's Pond installation, they have to be growing in reasonable enough numbers to do a denitrification study. We're going to have to go in and do those studies to get that piece. I would just call it gravy, to be honest with you. I would see denitrification as a component, but I wouldn't necessarily count it to start out.
We're not going to try to claim it if it's...
I don't think we're going to need to. If we find that we need to, then we'd have to go in and prove it with core sediment
That's why I asked
analysis.
it. Okay.
Yeah, where they're not going to give us credit the same way they do for the uptake in the meat and the shell. But that's a really good point. Should we add? I think, so I was going to suggest this sort of at the end, that we do want to have a monitoring component where we try to understand at what point should we be doing additional monitoring. I don't think right now is the answer. I don't think we need to monitor anything this summer. But I think if we were trying to do something like that, we would do it. On denitrifying septic systems, just to keep this
Well,
moving?
Stick with the shellfish.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I had one suggestion, I think Sam and I chatted about it. We have this whole planning thing of trying to determine how we're going to use the bottom of all these coastal ponds, and that ought to be a main project as part of agriculture.
Right.
So
Mapping suitable
The
bottom.
aquaculture plan.
That's what we're going to town meeting.
No, that's an initiative of the marine and
Right, but
environmental
I think we
folks,
need
but
to
it,
play
but
a
it's.
very active part.
I just wrote it in.
Okay.
And that's a special case of the more general thing, that by the beginning of 2018, we don't just need to know technical things about chlorophyll, we need to know everything. For instance, the politics and the economic, I assume, to make them, if the CWMP says we're going to put so many oysters here to do this, you not only have to know that they remove the nitrogen, but that you're allowed to put them
That's
there
right,
politically and
that we have the bottom
which way.
available to us for this purpose.
The whole
Yes.
thing.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Which means we should probably add Wacoit Bay and Great Bay to the list of places where we know enough about the bottom to make an informed decision about how much shellfishing can go on there.
So
this is basically a town plan to determine the use of the estuaries.
Yes.
So boating, swimming, aquaculture, how we're going to allocate all of those resources. And that seems to me to be a fairly major part of, in other words, you're not going to be able to deal with the aquaculture if you're not talking to the beach committee and the other stakeholders, the harbor master, the mooring,
The neighborhood
allocation.
Yep.
and
The
And
boating
that is
community.
the premise of this study that the harbor master and his people have asked for money for.
not enough, clearly.
No.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Matt.
I don't disagree with John, but I think that it'll be important to prioritize these issues. It's easy to put a channel through these ponds for boats to come in and out. It may not be available, we may not be able to make it available to people to water ski in them like they have traditionally done, but they can go out in the sound to do that. So I just think cleanup has to be a
But I'm
priority.
just saying, we have one grant, the Seapet River grant, in all of these coastal
Yeah.
ponds. We're now talking about dividing up the bottom and maybe having some more grants, having places where the town people can shellfish, and that we're relaying things. And I think we need to have a plan for that, and there is no
Sure.
plan.
The other piece, which John's raised before, and it should be in this section here, is oyster reefs.
Yes.
Oyster beds.
Well, you want to call them beds?
We
Okay.
have to call them beds. No, it's
Whatever you want to call them. We're talking about
the oyster beds.
But that's again part of
a
that
piece
plan.
of the puzzle that,
Yep,
because we actually have some in place now, and we know what.
yep, and that's in there. The bed's in there,
We
so.
need to know if we can put more and where we can put more, and so that's, you call them beds, all right.
Yep, but, and what, this was sort of a list of what we're actually doing.
Right.
And now it's kind of becoming a list of what we are doing and what we need to do. So that's a really good thing.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
And so I'm just inserting another row, and I'm gonna put oyster beds in other places. For example, when we've looked at Great Bay, the area, you've got Lefebvre Boat Landing, that area that's north and more into the water, that seems like an ideal spot for an oyster bed. So we want to look at that again, so we're just going to say other places. And then we had some places in Woquait.
Good.
Whoops, got it. I think the short story on, should we move on to denitrifying?
Yeah.
The short story on denitrifying septic systems is that we have an incredible potential with these layered soil absorption systems. And we've learned a lot with the West Falmouth project in terms of costs and just the physicality of installing an IA system on somebody's property. Access, just the practical stuff of living in 3 dimensions. These are big pieces of equipment. They have boulders next to the existing systems. I mean, usually the systems went in and then the house. So we've been really learning a lot about how these different systems go in, what they cost, what the logistics of it is. So between the West Falmouth Harbor Shoreline Septic Remediation Project that we'll have a final report by the end of June on, and George's layered system, in the next couple of years, I would say in the next 12 months, we'll have really valuable information so that we can say, how much nitrogen could one of these really remove? Is it 19 milligrams per liter or is it 9? And that makes a huge difference in how many you put in to solve the problem. And so we can start using them we'll know more about the tool. We'll know about how much they do, how much they cost, and hopefully be able to apply them really first to Oyster Pond as a potential location. Once we know what we need to know and don't have back-of-the-envelope calculations, but have really detailed analysis from 20 installations, which gives us a good degree of certainty for what we're looking at.
But here's a perfect example to point out why we should be a little bit scared, or maybe there's a way out of this. I talked to George Hoyhofer about the layer cake, specifically for Oyster Pond. And I said, when realistically do you think this will be ready to install at a random homeowner? Not some skilled, dedicated person like Bill Kerfoot, but John Q. Public. And he said 2 years at the earliest.
Mm-hmm.
That's 2018.
That's lightning speed.
Yeah,
That's lightning
it is.
speed.
But you have to explain to me how that fits with this.
We put it in the plan.
Oh, but that's not under deadline. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
No, using it anywhere else.
I see what you're getting at. If we wanted to use it
I
as.
just mentioned Oyster Pond
I
as to
see.
why I was talking to George.
Okay, but
Right.
if we were to use it in the Green Pond
Exactly.
watershed.
Right, we'd want,
Okay.
well, okay, so we could say, by 2018, we'll know how much they cost to put in, how effective they are, and I would get,
And that would
based on
be
what you
perfectly
said.
rational.
Re-emphasizing-
There's one other piece that needs to be put into this discussion. When the area of the town that was carved out for this comprehensive wastewater management plan was set up, it was to be a 20-year planning process with a 40-year lookout,
Sure.
okay? So, and we had to start. So we started, and we made a conscious choice. We started with the Little Pond watershed. We can then move to the next watershed and the next watershed and so on. So you don't have to have, by December 2019, a complete answer for each of those watersheds, but you at least need to have blocked out what you think would work, so that we clearly have spent an effort on looking at each of these watersheds. So some tools are going to have to be listed as a more general, we think this has potential as a specific IA system. But at this point, we're just going to say IA systems, for instance, for
Okay, so
the
at
lake.
that point, we can say it's a good faith, this is our good faith
Faith effort.
estimate of what we're gonna do.
That's right.
But 5 years from then,
Right.
in
Yeah.
2025 or
Right.
something, you can say, well, yes, we said that, but we found out that something else is better.
That's right. And
Adaptive management is the phrase, too.
exactly.
Yes.
Adaptive management is the phrase. And you may remember the original spreadsheet that showed, that Peter Boyer developed, that showed when there would be old debt paid off, and so we would have a new funding opportunity. So the new funding opportunity is actually 2025. So we have this deadline by the state. They want us to see us actively planning. So by 2019, we need to come up with our priorities of these, or the next watersheds we think should be tackled, and these are the tools we think we should use, and we will be able to fund it if it's a major funding issue by 2025.
Mike McGrath recently sent me an RFP that had been put out by Suffolk County in Long Island, in New York, and they were looking for requests for proposals for people to come in and do essentially the West Falmouth demonstration project. They'd like to have one of their own. And George's Layer Cake, they'd like to have somebody do that. So either they're following us right behind and using different names for these things, but it's basically they're on the same track, and they're only slightly behind us. But, what the heck, Suffolk County's got 2 million people in it, and we've got
Right.
30,000.
30,000.
Can I ask a question
Yeah.
before I go? I have to run.
Yeah, get to work in his house.
Hi, Doug Brown. So I just wonder if you have a handle on how long of a political process it'll be once you've got your recommendations and you send it to the selectmen. Will we then have to have public hearings and come back for reiterations? Because that could really get bogged down, and I wonder what constraints you'll be under with regard to that.
I'll take a stab at it, because you never can predict constraints. But I do believe that we, early in 2018, should draft a document as to how we think it ought to be structured, and have, I wouldn't call them hearings, but public discussions about that, and involve the selectmen at that point. Not, we're looking for your approval, but we're looking for your input. It'll be a bit more like a planning session when the planning board meets with the selectmen, so as we develop it. But by the end of 2018, we should have a draft document that would theoretically be approved by the selectmen and forwarded to the state. The state always goes through a review of a draft, and then they come back with all their comments, and it will take us all of 2019 to finally get through a final that will actually meet that deadline. Does that answer your question?
Pretty much, but I wonder, I just fear the process getting bogged down along the way here in town, and I wonder, will there need to be voting or public town meeting votes other than?
No, I don't
No.
see, no, I mean, the CWMP wasn't voted by town meeting. It is actually a selectman's, it's a selectman's vote to submit, to approve and to submit. The state really does understand adaptive management a lot better now than they did before, and through the Cape Cod Commission and this 208 planning that they've been doing, the towns really have been given more latitude. What the state is looking for is that you actually are doing planning and prioritizing and structuring. You're not just sort of blowing smoke and throwing words around. Where the town meeting comes in is if we decide, okay, this is the next watershed we want to work on. We've quote, taken care of Little Pond. okay, so this is the next watershed, and we need funding for either engineering or some form of design, that's when you'll go to town meeting for a specific dollar amount. As it is now, Article 17 was a bond issue and was approved. Our funding with that, at least the way we budgeted it, will take us through December of 2019. For this committee to continue to do anything substantive, we would need a new Article 17 of some sort. And likewise, if you prioritize a watershed and say, okay, we're now going to begin to install, you name whatever it's going to be, then that would need a town meeting permission. So that's how town meeting sort of integrates with the planning.
Great, thanks.
It's a good question, though.
Yep.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad the committee, I mean, we're sort of looking at this at the 5,000 foot level at this point. Because we've been doing so many things, it really is time for us to begin to synthesize the information that we have and to see how we're going to fit these deadlines, which are real.
Yeah, and it sort of seems like just generally, so we don't belabor each of these, that what we've got is this year to gather the final bits of data, and then really 2017 is the synthesis year, which allows us to hit I hope, hit the ground running in 2018 and write this, have it written by the end of 2018 and give us a whole year to finalize it through all the important stakeholder processes that you were talking about.
Right. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you. So eco toilets.
We have completed the eco toilet. At least all of the people who have said they were going to install them have done it, except for one, and I don't think they're really going to do it.
Can I go back for a second to the denitrify? So you're saying that by the end of 2017, you'll surely know the cost. You'll know that in June this year. And you'll have some performance data.
Exactly.
By 2017.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Because you need that.
Sure.
Yep.
That was the whole point of the exercise.
And we'll have information on the layer cake, and I think it's going to be perfectly reasonable to use. We have information on eco toilets. We're waiting for the final report from the county. As soon as that final report comes in, we're going to write a sort of a program report that includes the cost, the efficacy, the feedback we got from users, and think about where it may or may not fit in to the future. You know, we may want to offer it as options as we have, but we're going to know. So I feel like we've got what we need, just waiting for that final report, and that will certainly be done by the end of this year.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that if George's study does show that the nitrogen removal is sufficient, that it would be considered as an option for people who felt like who did need some kind of denitrification. It would not be the only option, but it would be an option, and as long as it met the standards of denitrification that the others met, why not?
Yep, that's where I think we've been talking exactly, that it would be denitrifying septic or eco toilets, once we show the removal rates. On PRBs, we have great work going in so many areas, and the PRBs are moving along. It's very exciting. Sailfish and shoreward, and Board of Selectmen on last week approved access agreement to go in and do some additional monitoring, groundwater characterization wells on the shoreward parcel. So,
but you won't have performance data by the end of 2017, right?
I think.
I mean, I'm not saying
No,
good
you're
work
right.
hasn't been done, and we know a lot, and it's good to know about where the flow is and so on.
Well.
But it's not like you can say, we put one in,
Well,
and it, look at this, no
Okay.
nitrogen.
I'm hearing
coming
some
out.
wells here.
okay. So there's actually some updating that's needed to this. EPA is, you might call it Shorewood Drive Phase 3. That's about to happen. EPA has agreed to round numbers, about a dozen wells that they're going to, some of them are clusters, in Shorewood, and that's going to happen within the next month.
A monitoring well or a PRB well?
Let me just finish. So they're basically monitoring wells, but they're being positioned so that a pilot PRB of a reduced length, and I can't give you the length, but just, it's not a big PRB, but it's a,
I think 50 feet.
all right, we'll just use 50 feet as an example. They're being positioned so that a theoretical PRB of 50 feet could be put in. There is to be another round of grants on permeable reactive barriers. You may remember a year ago, there was a deadline of July, and that's what got us the money that we're working with now. So there's going to be a second round, and I believe that we should prepare a pre-proposal. I don't know exactly when this round is going to be announced, but it would be for installation of a PRB, pilot PRB. And so that would be installed this fall?
2016.
This fall, this winter. So what I'm trying to say is.
Contracting and everything.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of these EPA, it's a grant. So they do all the contracting, they have the contractor, the town just cooperates and facilitates as needed, like access agreements and things like that.
No small feat. thank you very
But
much.
we don't have to fund it, and we don't do any of the contracting administration. The EPA nationally, and particularly Region 1, is very interested in permeable reactive barriers. But they obviously need real situations, so they're delighted that there are towns that are working with them on this.
I thought the point of the current program was a feasibility study.
Feasibility study, that's
For them to then select which ones they would do.
right. And
Actual demonstrations on.
Demonstrations.
And
Why
that's
is there
on
another
sailfish.
proposal hurdle then?
Because this is just the feasibility part, it's not an actual pilot installation.
Right, but isn't the feasibility to determine which ones they would do the,
It was, yes, I mean, it gives them a list of places that they might be interested in, but I still believe that they're going to require a second application of you, the town, saying, I have this information and I would like to proceed with that.
okay?
I may be wrong, but that's my sense from what I've heard. So we would probably need to have, for our part, in order to prepare such an application, we might need to hire Jim Begley again to help us sort of get that ready. In any case, what I'm trying to say is there would be a pilot installed. It would be the end of 2016 and into 2017. So by the end of 2017, we would have some field data. That's where I'm going with
Can I
this.
ask a question?
Of course. Yeah, would you mind using the mic, just so, thanks.
Ken Foreman, and as you know, I have a long time interest in PRVs. Are these is this a soluble injection
Good question. Yeah, what
carbon
are they
source?
What are they
Is that what
thinking?
you're talking about?
That's where the application piece goes in. In my mind, that's what we would be talking about. We would be talking about a soluble liquid, not a trench with wood chips.
Right.
But the town would be free to propose whatever it wished to propose as a possibility.
Right.
Virginia, where is that discussion taking place about what is the appropriate carbon source?
I don't know. I presume within EPA that discussion is taking place, but I haven't been involved. I was asked by EPA while we were out on site, are you thinking about what they termed in situ, which is the liquid? And I said yes, and that's because of the information that Jim Begley had given me, that was likely to be more effective.
And it's also in Orleans, so Orleans is going through the same kind of planning, and for the non-traditional, for a PRB demonstration, what's being recommended, and it's the same group, it's AECom, and Jim Begley is a subcontractor, it's all EVO, the emulsified vegetable oil. That's
What
what's
depths do you need to go to?
Fortunately, at the Shorewood parcel, we're fairly close. We're within 20 feet of the water table. And the same over at Sailfish is 20 feet to the water table. The thickness of the aquifer is another 60 feet.
Freshwater portion.
Freshwater portion, correct. But we are finding that and again, this is preliminary data, that the nitrate is not down at the 60-foot level. It seems to bottom out, I'll just use that word, around 40. So you 20 feet to the water table and then 20, 30 feet into the aquifer. So not terribly deep.
But really deep for a trench.
Right,
But deep for a trench.
Not feasible for a trench. I
Yes.
mean, I'm just wondering if there have been any thought of other mechanisms for getting particulate carbon down to depth, you know.
Haven't gotten that
Augering.
far yet.
It might be interesting to think about whether, if there's an opportunity to do a comparative study between two
Yes.
different
Right.
approaches.
Yes,
Right.
that's also been mentioned.
Yep,
Or proton exchange.
right. Well, there's that.
3 different approaches.
Yep.
However many approaches you can get funding
Right.
for.
Exactly. There's always another approach.
For the benefit of the press, Ken Foreman is the only person in Falmouth who has actually installed a PRB in the ground to intercept nitrogen.
That worked incredibly well, that launched this whole thing that the EPA likes. So
Right.
Can influence the EPA.
Just a question, maybe, I just don't understand the difference between, and it dawned on me, if you're talking about this emulsifier, you don't have to dig a trench, is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay,
Right.
Yep,
gotcha.
yep, you put down small wells and then you inject it down the small well.
Okay.
It moves. It's liquid.
Fracking in reverse.
Reverse
Yeah,
fracking.
we're not using that word.
All right, it's after 5.
Now, you were also mentioning an electronic or electrical. Or
Yeah, the proton exchange.
proton.
That's the idea.
And that would
you
involve wires going down there, or what?
You have a cathode and an anode. You don't need the wires. You just have a cathode and an anode, and you put a current through, and it changes the pH enough to release.
Frankenstein.
Well, we have a fragmentary knowledge of this.
I do think we need to pay attention about what we're thinking of injecting into these wells. And I wouldn't just take EPA saying, well, we've got some vegetable oil we found somewhere, and let's squirt that in the ground.
Right.
I think some thought needs to
Good point.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. And all of that underscores why I'm just saying to the committee, I think we probably should develop another contract to have some
Right,
technical
and
advice.
as to Steve's point about what will we know and when will we know it,
Yes.
the fact that you've put it in the ground and a year has gone by doesn't mean that you know its long-term efficacy is there.
That's
Good
right.
point.
Yes, it would obviously.
Has anyone injected vegetable oil anywhere?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes, it's been used in many industrial sites for specific cleanup of specific plumes, and it works.
Also in many salads.
So
put the vinegar in
in
the oil.
industry, it's a common practice, but as a long-term solution for nitrates in groundwater that, may travel for 50 years from upstream, somewhat
Were
different.
the industrial chemicals that they removed water-soluble ones?
Perchlorate?
Okay.
Yeah, they're obviously in the aquifer, they have to be somewhat water soluble, otherwise they would have attached to grains of sand and been immobilized.
Yeah.
I had one other question about this. So when we first brought this up to the town, there was a lot of concern about pharmaceuticals, personal care products, contaminants of emerging concern as a reason not to do this. And we may be finding that at least the wood chip barrier is an impediment to those, but is that still something that the committee worries about?
I think one study that we found was that they didn't travel too far from the septic tanks.
Right, so one study that was actually done by Silent Spring found that if they tested a soil absorption system. Have you seen the study? Are you not?
No.
Oh. All right, so they tested and they found a handful of what they tested for sort of at the surface, right below the leach field, and by 20 meters, not by
gone.
20, by 20 feet, thank you, I'm just remembering what conversion factor I used, they were gone. So there's attenuation, and George has found the same thing at the test center, and so the idea is the same bacteria that are denitrifying, that the same kind of colonies will take the carbon out of these chemicals. I
Or
mean,
something's
pharmaceutical,
decomposing.
yeah, they're compounds. They're elemental compounds with a carbon backbone, so.
Right.
That's
Yeah, no, we
the
found-
same results that were found in European studies. And when they used it as fertilizer, urine as fertilizer, they found out a lot of these things were used up in the first few centimeters of soil, or broken down in the first few centimeters
So we had a
of soil.
student looking at these, and they looked both at the Mass TC, at the septic systems, and at the wastewater treatment plant here, and didn't find, they found a lot going in the influent stream,
Right,
and very little coming out.
Right.
yeah.
Right,
in
that was a
both
good study,
cases.
actually.
So, but, you know, it wasn't comprehensive, wasn't for all compounds, but for, you know, triclosan and ibuprofen and some of those, caffeine, some of those compounds.
Triclosan?
Yeah, which is, you know, in
Hand sanitizer.
toothpaste.
Yeah, I know, it's
antimicrobial.
awful stuff.
So that's good news.
Yes.
All right, any more on the PRBs? I will say, it's quite likely that Falmouth's going to end up with a PRB, because I'm watching how much work goes into getting these test wells into the ground. You don't just do a test well and put it in the ground. You got to get the Conservation Commission on board, you got to get the selectmen on board, you have to go, here, the DPW, everybody has to be in on the act to put a test well in the ground, and it's a lot of work, and there's a couple of people here who've been doing a lot of it.
In my mind, that's I mean, there's nothing wrong with PRBs, but the biggest disadvantage is that you have to include in the cost the R&D for each PRB. It's as though Ford and GM had to design each car,
Right.
not each model.
Yeah. No,
Each
you're right.
car from scratch.
You're right, each site has to
Thereby,
be,
you know, your
Yeah.
cars would cost you hundreds of millions of dollars
Yeah.
apiece.
yeah. No, that is a big problem. Yeah, you can't just plonk them in the ground.
That's right. Yep, that's a very good observation.
Mm.
If, on the other hand, you end up getting a big hunk of nitrogen out,
It's worth it.
it's worth it, because it takes the atmospheric nitrogen, all of the runoff nitrogen, fertilizer, as well as the
Right.
households.
But it's more like inlet winding than like eco toilets and denitrifying septic systems.
Yeah,
Right.
okay,
Which brings us to inlet widening.
okay.
We are on track. The MEPA certificate came out last week, and permitting is moving forward, and we're planning for construction in 2018, I believe.
Right, and they've asked us to do about 5,000 things, but no more than we expected.
They're not undoable things either.
Yeah.
We are, as far as Oyster Pond, just trying to move along. I think that we have, so as far as technically, the alternatives analysis has been completed for Oyster Pond, and right now, we took a hiatus on developing the recommended plan based on more information on two things. One was the flow at the wastewater treatment facility, and the other was more information on IA systems. Both are pending, so I think the idea is that this year, maybe early next year, we'll be developing that plan. We've talked about that a little bit. Fertilizer bylaw is ongoing. We're about to send out the next mailing.
We might at some point think about how to ratchet up the enforcement of that, if it's going to get us.
Education.
If it's going to get us any credit. I mean, I think if they're happy with what we're doing now, leave it alone. But if we could do something that would improve the score, maybe it's worth thinking about. We'll find out.
We'll find out. Stormwater best management practices, they've got the installations in Barnstable and Chatham. I've been trying to get performance data, haven't been able to get any performance data yet, but we should look at them. The Association for the Preservation of Cape Cod did not get awarded their grant for their study. They did a full proposal and it was not funded. And so they're gonna resubmit. So that may come back. Fortunately, the NEPDES permit, the non-point discharge permits that the town has to get every year include doing a town-wide inventory of storm drains. So the town is actively involved. And I think that our approach should just be, as there are specific stormwater systems that make sense, we include them in our CWMP. Otherwise, we don't. I think that's a perfectly rational approach. It's not going to get us what we
Right.
need. It's a little small piece. So we shouldn't be spending, talk about dollars per kilogram. These can be $1 million projects, could get 20 kilograms of nitrogen, so there's no point.
No, they're not worth it for us, that's for sure. And to be fair, whatever obligation the town has is going to be imposed on them straight
Three-
from the feds.
Exactly.
Without, it's
So-
nothing to do with nitrogen.
So in the row for stormwater, BMPs, after 2017, we can just write N period, A period, right?
Or include in plans as, I would say, see how it says identify storm drains to retrofit with BMPs? There should be an inventory, and then we just carry forward, include in plans. As the
But
town.
there's no real significant effect on that plan.
No,
No.
no, it's a very small actor.
But there are other environmental factors. I mean, not that we're responsible for them, but
Sure.
it is very toxic to fish and shellfish and carries a lot of heavy metals. If you're talking about shellfish and propagating shellfish, certainly you don't want a lot of heavy metals in the sediment. So,
Well, and that's why as the ones come up, like the ones in Falmouth Harbor, those were clearly going to be on our radar screen because of the significant amount of nitrogen and all that other stuff, so.
right.
But yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's lots of good reasons to fix stormwater. Fortunately, the DPW is responsible for it.
We got to make sure that they
And we can
do a good
monitor.
job.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So sediment aeration, I'm happy to report, I guess, that there's going to be a feasibility study this summer. I think that's, so the to be determined is now a pilot installation this summer, and I think I'll be really interested to see about the results.
You're presuming the selectmen come up with, agree with us on the money?
Have they ever disagreed?
Not yet.
And you
Don't
find the
jinx
other
it.
12,000 something.
Right, I will.
Pardon?
And that we get the rest of.
And then we get the rest of the money.
The money or the match, whatever comes in.
Right. So hopefully, we'll be able to do that this summer and see how that, I have to fix this. We're not waiting on EPA on anything anymore.
No.
And then, last but not least, well, I said we have money. So stream nitrogen removal. Steve, do you want to update the committee on where the working group is? Or do you want me to?
Sure. I wasn't planning on it, but well, actually, I have a piece of paper. We need to do some experiments. C is, correct me if I'm wrong, going to do a little more web research and then file a grant application sometime in April. Is that fair to say?
I'm not sure that, so the RFP still hasn't come out yet, so.
Well, when it comes out.
Right, it's going to get filed after the
which-
RFP.
Which we hope is soon. And that will, if we get that grant, we hope that we can work with Ken and other good people and do experiments on the engineering parameters of wood chips and meadow rocks and things like that for river water, with barrels pumping river water into watching what happens. Once we have that data, we can do all the rough engineering calculations. I've been talking to Steve Rafferty about it. He's quite comfortable with it. And making it fish-friendly and debris-friendly and get a rough cost and a rough nitrogen return on investment number. Our very rough calculations on maybe the back of the stamp instead of the back of an envelope say that it's possibly a factor of 5 or 10 less expensive than the other cheapest known alternatives, such as the layer cake and so on. And which means that in the Coonamessett River, in principle, you could save the town $9 to $14 million.
As opposed to sewering the whole area.
And now, as opposed to IAs.
Even IAs, okay.
Or eco
Yeah.
toilets or anything else.
Okay, okay,
That I know of.
okay.
But we have to pin those numbers down. I assume that in a town where the annual budget is, what, 125 million, that would get people's attention. That's
Absolutely.
what the town manager's salary for 100 years. And,
That's an interesting comparison.
That's a great,
The Board of Selectmen, they want to talk to you.
That's right.
and,
Sort of like a millennial.
or I don't know what it is, the school budget. So, the other big unknown is getting it approved by Concom. And we'll have to discuss the right order in which to do those things.
sure.
I think the order you laid out is pretty good. You come up with a feasible technology and a compelling financial argument, then you go say, see them.
Right, because we would be making a huge improvement in the environment, in the estuary, at a very small cost, negligible, unobservable cost, to another area that's being restored.
Yeah, you got to get
To me,
DEP to go along with it.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, there are a lot of permitting problems and so
Yes.
on, but as I said, if your annual budget is 125 million and you can save 10 million, you have to pay attention to that.
And just to add, the thing we were looking for is a feasible system that was not the demonstration in the Coonamessett to start, but to look for a different river system, and I think the Quashnet kind of comes up, or the Moonachus, as a potential area to look at.
Yes, C has done a great job of looking at the other
There's also,
estuaries.
there's water coming down the Childs.
Sure.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I meant,
right.
Right.
the Eel
Yeah.
River.
Yep.
The
So
criteria
those
being,
looking in Wacoit is a place to sort of,
and no fish.
no trout.
Oh, they're trout in the
Well,
child.
But those, well,
There's fish in the rivers. It's not gonna hurt.
I'm just curious, you're talking about barrels with stones in them?
the
No,
the
that's
barrel
the
is
test.
the experimental size, 55-gallon drum.
Yeah.
That we do on a grant. The actual thing has to handle, if it's, I happen to know the numbers for the Coonamessett River, because that's the elephant in the room. Some of the other rivers, it will work, but the amount of nitrogen removed may not be worth a candle. For the, again, very rough calculations, so for the Coonamessett River, where the flow,
I
it's
understand
of
the
the order
flow.
of an acre,
But
a
you're
couple of
talking
acre
about
feet.
blocking the flow so water has to travel through it.
Ideally, you would build a dam, take all the water out, process it, put it back in with no nitrogen in it. But that's unacceptable because there's no way for the fish to get past. So Ken came up with a very clever idea. You just take out, say, a fifth of it, process that, put it back in. And a little ways downstream, you take out another fifth.
Okay, all right.
And of course, it's mixed in between, so that's, you get some losses, but you can still get rid of 2/3 of the nitrogen by doing that 5
Great.
times. But you're talking about much bigger than the 55-gallon drum.
Right, hey, win.
Is this sort of like a PRB?
Exactly.
In the river?
Yeah,
Exactly.
right, a floating PRB.
Or diverting the river through a PRB.
Through a
Right,
PRB.
right.
For long enough to.
You don't have to dig the PR in the ground.
For a portion of the river,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Right.
that you
The
got it.
thought process is, well, PRBs work, and George's layer cake works. So your first stab is, all right, fill the river with wood chips. It's obviously totally unacceptable, totally unacceptable for a
Which
lot
is
of
my
reasons.
idea.
But just as a thought experiment for a few seconds, right?
Right.
That would work. So then you don't put it in the river, you put it over to the side and divert the river through it and then back into it.
And other permutations thereof.
Yes, right.
But we do need to test the river water going through, and we also want to test the estuary water, so you got freshwater side and saltwater side. So that's stream nitrogen removal. We're glad we have a working group still.
Yes, yes.
And last but not least, we do and need to discuss where to monitor. I mean, obviously, pond watch has been going on. We've got monitoring stations and people collecting samples, and so we're gonna see if, and we've got MBL monitoring places, like West Falmouth is being monitored, abundant amount of monitoring, and so the idea is, where do we, probably for next summer, want to start doing some monitoring, and we're gonna have a big monitoring program for Bourne's Pond as part of the implementation of the inlet widening. I mean, monitoring is a big
Right.
piece of that. So Bourne's Pond is gonna have some significant monitoring, and we just wanna keep thinking about where else we wanna be able to have baselines so we can show improvement. And that's all we're gonna do for the next few years, not too much.
Any other comments or questions on this? We'll come back to it from time to time, because we're getting some progress reports on all these things. But, report of members and staff. Any other reports of members and staff on anything that we haven't already covered?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, vote on minutes of prior meeting. The minutes were sent around on Tuesday. Everybody got a copy? Everybody's reviewed them?
One correction, I did not put Steve Layton's name in that set of the minutes, so with that correction.
Okay.
Sorry, Steve.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the minutes with that correction?
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, discussion?
I abstain, I was absent.
He was absent. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Matt, we need a motion.
I move to, we adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Moved and seconded by somebody.
Second.
Doesn't matter.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. We are adjourned. I thought this was very productive.
Yeah.
And thank